Hey guys, LevelCap and Luton here with an episode of On the Level, and today we're going to be discussing infantry gameplay in Battlefield, sort of the evolution of it, and what kind of gameplay mechanics are extremely popular. And first of all, we're going to start talking about some of the lack of interest in armored kill and perhaps why that might be. So Luton, you want to start us off with that?
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting with Armored Kill that it started off quite strong and everyone was very impressed by the overall grandeur of the maps. You know, you got the AC-130, which a huge amount of people have been talking about. People were loving all the tank combat, the massive size of the maps and so on and so on. But as it's kind of gone along and people have started to get a stronger feel, and I always think that that's the right thing to do, is that you shouldn't judge a DLC in the first week, because it's not always the most easily comparable gameplay, because people often play slightly differently when they're trying to get a feel for the maps, the vehicles and everything. So it's best to give it a couple of weeks before you really start to decide how the gameplay is. And what we've found is that, I know for the console side anyway, and it may be different for PC, but for the console side, it's been quite difficult to find Armored Kill maps unless you have your own server and you've set it up to be that way. A lot of people had Armored Kill maps constantly for like the first week, and now they've sort of disappeared. I've had many people that I play with, and even my subscribers, all saying the same thing, that when they tried to find Armored Kill maps, there really are not so many of them, and the ones that are up are less well populated. And it does seem to suggest that, I mean, people are obviously going to make the link and the connection that with the console they say, okay, well that's just because Armored Kill doesn't suit console because the maps are too big, and also the fact that people hate the whole rush situation. Personally, I feel like people have been taking it too negatively in that they haven't kind of perhaps got to grips, but you know, it still stands that it seems to be that people are not liking the Armored Kill stuff, and they have a stronger love of the sort of more infantry involved maps.
Well, it's definitely the same on PC. The lack of servers was immediately noticeable, and part of that could be because the first few weeks it was just for premium members, and then it finally came out for everyone. But even after it came out for everyone, we were all kind of sitting around expecting this big server boost or something to show up, and it didn't really come. And it's like, wow, Armored Kill just kind of was a real flop. I mean, it looks beautiful. It's kind of hard to think about because the maps look so gorgeous, but the gameplay really is much slower. You have to have armor, and I think it's really because the lack of good infantry combat is really taken away from it. Now, I'm not saying I haven't had interesting infantry moments, especially in rush gameplay on there, but for the most part, it's really hard to just really incorporate some of that good close quarter infantry combat or working with a group of infantry in a squad, especially when something like the AC-130 can just decimate you. And I think it kind of goes to show that armor-intensive maps in Battlefield tend to be less popular than the infantry-heavy maps. And going as far back as something like Battlefield 1942, you had I think it was a Berlin map or something like that, and it was pretty much only infantry. I think there might have been one tank in it or an APC, like a half track or something in there. And it was one of the most popular maps. You'd join up all the time. It would be constant infantry combat. Everybody liked it, and it was just insanely popular. I think there's been a huge pull for these infantry heavy maps, and it just goes to show when you release an expansion that's geared specifically for armored stuff, tanks flying, all that stuff, the popularity just dwindles.
I think it has as much to do as well with the map design itself, the fact of what a map can incorporate. And I think when you have maps that are designed to handle infantry and perhaps lighter vehicles, so they're kind of smaller maps, the whole geography of that map itself as well allows kind of better gameplay. When you think about maps like Noshar Canals and stuff like this, because of their size, it means that even if you're playing with completely random players, you can just rely on the fact that, okay, there's going to be random people dotted around the map, but because the map is not too big, it allows for kind of random people to sort of buffer between different points on the map. But when you have a much larger map, the problem is that people will just kind of drive around, and they can you know, walk through huge gaping holes in defensive areas.
There's no front lines.
No, not at all. And you know, I've said this to people. I've said, you know, I've tried to make a couple of points in my videos when I've been discussing it, especially on rush defense, because so many people complain about rush defense on Armored Armoured Kill. And in my opinion, there is really, other than the AC-130, not a huge amount of difference. It tends to just be the openness of the map, and unfortunately people are not naturally good at looking at where other people are in relation to themselves and going, okay, I've got 3 guys next to me, a couple of guys at the front, so I need to go over here. It's a combination of their kind of discipline and just general self-awareness. If they spread out more, which sometimes when I'm in a game that will happen, when it happens you defend perfectly well, but when people don't, you just suddenly get overrun by people flanking you, crashing through you, and on a more open map which is designed for vehicles, it's just naturally much more difficult to do that. But that's why when you look at maps like, for example, the Karkan maps, which have very kind of concentrated areas of fighting and stuff like that, it just kind of creates this more intense combat where everyone is in the same area and you have a kind of focus point to get onto. It just makes for naturally better combat, and that's what people like. And I think going into Aftermath, when they're talking about infantry, light vehicles, urban combat, I think it's going to be getting back towards the kind of Karkan gameplay, and I think that those kind of styles are going to be what people love, and I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think it could set a precedent for what is the most popular thing in Battlefield and where they go forward with perhaps even the next game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're going to learn so much. I'm really excited to see what happens when Aftermath comes out, because I'm really pumped for it. I'm looking really forward to it. I was looking forward to Armor Kill, but I'm not going to lie, I kind of predicted what was going to happen because I knew a huge portion of the Battlefield crowd doesn't go in vehicles. You know, they like the infantry stuff. All you got to do is go on Battlelog, look at the servers. It's Metro, Sane, Bazaar, Karkand, and a lot of the infantry heavy maps. You know, that's what's populated. And then you've got the instant vehicle spawn giant conquest maps that are titled like Learn to Fly or something like that.
Yeah.
But Aftermath will be a really good test to see, like, if Aftermath bounces back and all of a sudden becomes like a big, huge hit or something, and a lot of people are playing it right off the bat. It'll be interesting to see if DICE takes that information and data and really plugs it in to perhaps upcoming DLCs or the next Battlefield game. Are they going to make it more infantry geared, kind of like Bad Company 2 was, where pretty much every map in Bad Company 2 was a lot of fun? There wasn't any map in Bad Company 2 where I was like, I really don't like this map. You know, I mean, I guess Heavy Metal, which was the most armored focus map, even had a lot of good infantry gameplay in it. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here.
I think as well, like when we just think overall about different popular maps and you look at the ones that stand out, and we are talking about stuff like Metro and, for example, Sane Conquest. I had a really excellent game on Sane Conquest the other day, and the interesting thing about that was that I like to generally play on kind of lower ticket count servers, 100%, 200%, not much more than that. I went onto this server, and it was actually the Battlefield Friends guys server, which was a really good one to play on, and they had their ticket count set to 500%. Now, I naturally really don't like that, but on Sane Conquest it just made for such an involved game that I played it. The round lasted 50 minutes, I think, something like that, and I was not bored or frustrated throughout that entire game because it was just constant action all the time. When you think about Sane Conquest, all the bases are in such kind of close proximity to one another that you can just run from one to the next. You've got literally just 2 tanks, so it's not overwhelming with the amount of armor on that map, and you get really good kind of point-to-point infantry combat. As well, when you think about that map, think about the difference in ranges. There's a lot of close, medium and long-range engagements around that whole map. And the fact that it's very simple, it's literally just a square with inter-crossing sections throughout it, it just makes for really excellent gameplay. And I've said this before, that map design really almost dictates the popularity and the success of gameplay. I was playing a Conquest game on Bandar the other day. Now, I know that whenever I say that Conquest on console is not good, people always, you know, bitch and pull me down on it. But unfortunately, I can't deny that when I play these games, you know, I had full teams in both sides, and I managed to just drive around in a quad, cap 4 bases, and I didn't even see another player. I didn't see one other player. Now, obviously, right,
Get a lot of flag capture ribbons, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, you know, it's always going to depend on what team you get. Okay, some teams are going to be really aggressive, you know, they're going to push through those bottlenecks, they're going to fight, but I think you have to try and look at the kind of overall context, the big picture. Okay, what percentage of the games you play end up being good and bad? Okay, there's always going to be specific situations, and it just seems to be that, you know, these kind of balanced maps which have a good mix of infantry and light armor seem to be the ones that do really well. And I have to say, I enjoy them more. I find that they give you a better mix of combat, and for that, and they're more kind of consistent. They're more consistent. You don't have like periods of 10 minutes where you don't see another player, you know?
Yeah, well, you can join the map, and any player can kind of play to their forte, their style. If you want to snipe, you can snipe in that map. If you want to play support, you can lay down machine gun, and there's still armor in there, so you can slap some C4 to the side of a tank and take it out.
Yep.
You still have a lot of options in these smaller maps. They're just really well designed, and it's not necessarily linear because Bazaar and Sane are not linear maps, but overall, if you look at them from like a top-down perspective, it's like, all right, there's a dissecting road here and a few little ways to get through over here on flank on the sides, but overall, they're very simple designs. There's not too many ways to go, but not too few to make the choke points too insane, so you get a good mixture of infantry combat and flanking, and then you compare that to Grand Bazaar or Armored Shield. Is that what it's called?
Shield,
yeah, Armored Shield. And it's just like, all right, here's a giant open desert or a giant open meadow with some flags sprinkled throughout it and an AC-130 flying around, raining terror down on everyone. Like, there isn't any real natural choke points in the map, or like, oh man, they've taken the bridge, now we gotta push around this way or flank over here. It's no, you just drive towards the flag, start shooting at guys when you see them. Like, there isn't really much in the way of front lines or anything. I mean, it's just kind of chaos on a big plate.
I don't think it's a good idea to always have just one style of map, because that would be boring, you know? Like, if we always just had the same medium balanced maps, it would be tedious, because, you know, you would just, each map, although it would look different, would feel the same. So I think you do need to have these big open maps in there, and these kind of more linear, tighter maps, and because they do give different styles of gameplay. But I just think that, you know, you need to kind of favour the ones that people enjoy more. Now, that doesn't always necessarily mean even that they have to, you know, be the same. They could have very, very different features, layouts, and all the rest of it. But I do think that, you know, maps that give people the opportunity to play, you know, in the style that they want to, are always going to be more successful.
Well, it's like compare back to Karkand to Bazaar.
Yeah.
Entirely different maps in terms of like how much they funnel you in areas. Like, Karkand's much more open, Bazaar's much more confined, but you still get good close quarter infantry combat, but they feel different. The maps feel different. Yet the layout has managed to keep everybody sort of close and together, and it feels different. You know, Karkand's got all these different levels on it. You can go up hills, you can be on ledges overlooking people, you can get on top of taller buildings. Bazaar's much more ground level, peeking corners. Like, you don't really have to look up ever in Bazaar, except for in a few situations. But I mean, there's still a huge amount of variety, I think, that you can have, even with tighter maps that are more infantry involved.
Yeah, I totally agree, because, you know, you could have a really balanced variety of maps that are still kind of, you know, in a different style, closer, condensed. And also, when you think about the kind of involvement of vehicles, it could be that we start sort of, maybe they ditch jets, for example, and just focus more on helicopters, lighter vehicles. Maybe we have a kind of a slightly broader range of lighter armored vehicles, maybe bring in stuff back like the Bradley, things like that, and ditch the real heavy armor, because, you know, it only comes into its own on these bigger open maps. If you're looking at scaling it down and making them more infantry based, you know, you can still have an area to move around in those maps, but maybe it just doesn't require the heavy armor.
I think probably the best example, one of the best map designs, and my personal favorite map in Battlefield, is Caspian Border, because it appropriately, and I know a lot of console guys probably aren't going to get this, but it plays out really well on PC, where you've got 3 capture points towards the center of the map that as infantry you can run between entirely on foot. You're kind of protected by this rocky, foresty area. And you can run with rockets to make sure if tanks decide to sort of push up too close, they'll get blown up, and you can throw out landmines everywhere. So you've got this area of the map that works really well for infantry, and then some of the outlying points are a little bit further away, and that's where the armor is a bit more successful. So it's like the only map I've seen that really successfully combines like infantry and heavy armor combat together. So I wouldn't mind seeing more stuff
Yeah.
like that, but it's just most of the maps seem to be entirely one or the other.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, when you think about other maps like Karg, or even if you go to like Bandar and stuff like that, they have, they're very spread out all the way around. Whereas Caspian, yeah, it is a really good example. And Caspian works well on console as well. I think it works well, as you say, to have those kind of closer knit bases in the center of the map. And then if you think about having like a kind of satellite area that runs all the way around, that allows for your fast travel from different ends of the base, so you can move around all the way around the map, but you can also have combat at range firing in on those closer positions. The other interesting thing that I really like about Caspian is the kind of geography and the natural design of it. You have these big rocks, you have kind of lower ground, small rocks, you have higher positions where people can fire down on each other, you've got the bridges and so on and so on. I wish they would bring back bridge destruction, because I feel like that can be such a tactical thing. When you think about Caspian, those bridges there, they don't do a lot, but it can help to, for example, destroy a road route. It can just slow things down a little bit, and there's several bridges throughout Battlefield which I really feel that they should bring back. I mean, think about Wake, for example. I mean, that's quite an open map as well, but it'd be nice to have that back. So I think what we would really like to see, I mean, I would like to see, is kind of lighter combat but in a more condensed environment. And I don't think we ever want to be in a situation where you end up getting put into a little box. We know the different kinds of game where you have that, but I do think we should have slightly more condensed positions with an area for vehicles to move around, so you get more fluid gameplay, but you keep up the fierceness of that combat.
And that seems, from the screenshots that I've seen, that seems what Aftermath looks like it's going to be. And so it'll be really interesting to see. I know Battlefield 4 is a long ways off, not till 2014 apparently. Is it going to be another conglomerate of just these random kinds of game modes, and here's Giant Conquest, and here's super close quarters team deathmatch on No Shark Canals, and here's this and here's that? Or are they going to try and find an overall feeling for the gameplay and sort of go a little bit beyond and a little bit below that feeling, but ultimately keep it around one centralized theme of gameplay? So we'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Do you want to see more Giant Conquest stuff in, say, Battlefield 4? Or would you rather have Battlefield really hone in and centralize on some of the more popular and the more fun gameplay mechanics? So leave your comments in the comment section of this video, and we'll see you guys next time. This is Luton and LevelCap signing off.